Okay, so what we're going to do is use Adobe Photoshop to create a snow day image for our district website. So in case we have any snow days this winter, we have an image to put onto the website to let everybody know that school is closed. What we're actually going to do is we are going to create this image from scratch just using Adobe Photoshop. We'll start off with a blank canvas. We'll draw some snow hills, we'll put in some trees, we'll have a snowman, some snowflakes falling, and you can get as creative as you would like with what you put into Adobe Photoshop. We're going to use just some basic layer styles, some text, some brushes, and we're going to introduce you to the pen tool, which is a really neat tool in Adobe Photoshop. So the first thing I'm going to do just in Adobe Photoshop is I'm just going to come up to the menu bar and I'm going to go to File and New, and I'm going to create a new document. Now for the purposes of using it on our school's website, we want this new document to be 800 pixels wide and 550 pixels tall. And then we can just leave the resolution at 72, and the only other thing we want to make sure is that the background contents are white. And we'll just go ahead and say OK, and you will get a blank white image out onto your screen. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use the rectangle tool to create the background, kind of the bluish sky that'll be the backdrop for our scene. I'm going to go ahead and grab the rectangular marquee tool, and I am just going to go up onto my canvas, and I am just going to go from one corner all the way down to the other corner, and I am going to cover the entire thing with my rectangular marquee tool. Now we can edit the size later on, but you want to try to get it perfect as quickly as possible. So now you see I've covered this, and we're really not worried about the color. It's black right now, but that's really insignificant, because what we're going to do is once we've created this rectangle, and here you see it in my layers palette, shape 1, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rename that background. We're going to come down to the bottom of the layers palette, and I'm going to go to the add a layer style icon. And I'll go ahead and click on that, and I'm going to choose a gradient overlay to add to this rectangle. Now it defaults to just this black and gray, or at least it does on my computer, this black and gray color. And the first thing we're going to do is edit the colors so we can create a nice blue sky. To edit the colors, I'm simply just going to go ahead and double click on here, and my little color gradient editor box will come up. Now what I'm actually going to do is I am going to create 3 separate colors, and I can do that using these markers down here. The first one's just going to be kind of a light blue, so I'll just go ahead and double click on this first color stop marker, and up comes my color picker. Now I could spend some time going through and picking different colors, you know, through the little sliders here, but I actually know some color codes I want to use, so I'm going to go ahead and just type in this one. It's CDF5FF, and I'll go ahead and say OK. And you don't have to use these exact colors, you can kind of mess around and create your own. I'll go ahead and say OK. I'm actually going to create a second color marker right in this area right here, and I can create it just by clicking, double clicking, excuse me, and there you see I get the color marker. And I'll double click on it, and the color code for this one is going to be 0067A9. I'll go ahead and say OK, and then I'm going to create a final color marker, or edit my final color marker, excuse me, and it's going to be 040023, and that's a little bit of a darker blue, and I'll go ahead and say OK. Now once I have all my colors chosen, I can go ahead and slide these sliders around a little bit just to kind of add more light or more dark, just kind of to get it, you know, however I like it. And then once I get it to where I like it, I can just go ahead and say OK. And now I can mess with the rest of the settings on the gradient overlay tool. You see here we have the blend mode is normal, we'll leave it there. And the opacity is at 100%, we'll leave it there. Obviously here's our gradient colors. For our style, this is set at linear, which is why we kind of have these across horizontal color rows. I'm actually going to change that to radial, and so now I get this circular color areas. Now I want most of my picture to be this light blue and then this secondary blue and then maybe just the outer edges to be this dark blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here in my scale and I'm just going to increase it out a little bit to where I think it's about where I want it. And I can also mess with the angle here. And I'm going to put my angle at about negative, I don't know, 25, 26, something like that. Once again, you would just play with this in your own picture. And my scale, I'm going to leave it at about 117. That way I just get some darker edges up here in the corner. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And now I have a little bit of a background, okay, like a wintry day background. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to start drawing some of our hills, at least our first hill, our big hill. And I'm going to do that by using the pen tool. So before we get to the pen tool, I'm going to come down to my layers palette and I'm going to create a new layer. And you want to put everything on new layers. That way you can always go back and edit these items. And I'm going to rename this layer Big Hill. That way if in the future I want to edit the big hill, I simply know what layer to go to. If I come over to my toolbox, I'm going to come over here on the left hand side and almost all the way down at the bottom you will see your pen tool collection. And I'm going to go ahead and choose just the basic pen tool, which if I right click is the upper, it's the top one on the list. And with the pen tool I'm going to create a hill. It's really, really easy. Now before I get started, there's just a couple things that I need to make sure that I have. Number one, I need to have my colors at black and white. If there's something else, you can just click on the little reset button and reset them to black and white. And then the second option is up here in the tool options bar. The style, you see how the style is defaulted to whatever I just used on my background here? I don't want that. I'm going to go ahead and just pull down this little drop down menu and I'm just going to choose no style. So I'm just going to completely get rid of my style. My color's black, that's fine. We'll go ahead and edit that once we get the hill drawn. So I can draw my snow hill, and to do it's really easy. I'm just going to take my pen tool and I'm just going to left click 4 times. Now the key is to make sure I click outside of my picture. So I'll click once here, I'm going to come over here to the right, I'll click once there, and I'm going to come down below my picture and outside of it there. I'll click on this side. And then I'll go ahead and finish my hill right there. So now I have a snow hill. Well, it doesn't really look much like a hill, it just kind of looks like a rectangle. But what's great about the pen tool is it allows me to create anchor points where I can manipulate what I've just drawn. So all I need to do is come back over to my pen tool. I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose my Add Anchor Point tool. And now I'm just going to create 2 anchor points. I'm going to go ahead and create one right here, and then I'm just going to go down over here and create a second one. And now I can just come up and I can just grab this first anchor point and let's go ahead and lift it a little bit. And now you see I'm getting a little bit of a hill. I can come over here to the right and lower it, and there we go. Okay, I got kind of rolling hills. I can raise this as high as I want. I can make a nice steep hill that maybe someone would go, skiing down. Or I can just kind of make little rolling hills. I can also lengthen out my hill. There you can see I can lengthen it out that way, and I can do all kinds of things messing with my Add an Anchor Point tool. So now I've kind of created a set of rolling hills, but they're black. So I need to go ahead and change those. And it's the same way we created this background. I'm going to create some snow. With my big hill layer selected, I'm just going to come down to the Add a Layer Style menu, and I'm going to go to Gradient Overlay. And once again, we'll have that same exact menu that we had just a minute ago. Now, before I even mess with the Gradient Overlay, well, no, let's go ahead and do the Gradient Overlay first. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and change my colors. You see I have kind of like a gray, white, and black. I'm just going to go ahead and double click it. And over here on the left, I'll go to my color picker, and I'm just going to make the color 004D8E. Okay, that's my color code. I'll go ahead and say OK. You see it's kind of a bluish color. And then I'm going to come over here to the right, and I'm going to make my color using the color code 68C4ED. Another color blue. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. Now, I'm going to go ahead and change a few other things on here. Let me go ahead and say OK. This time I'm going to leave it as linear, but I'm going to change my angle, and you can go ahead and mess with different settings, but I'm going to change mine to a -49. Alright, and that way I kind of have like the darker hills over here and the lighter hills over there, and I will go ahead and say OK. And so now I've added my gradient. I'm actually going to pop right back into that menu, the Add a Layer Style menu, and I'm going to add an inner glow to our hill. And once I get to our inner glow, up will pop up my inner glow dialog box, and I'm going to mess with a few things. I want it to be screen. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to lower my opacity to about 45% just to make it you know, a little less obvious. The big thing is I need to change my color here from yellow to a white. I'll go ahead and change it to white, and I'm going to leave it at softer. I'm going to leave it at edge. I'm going to leave the choke at 0, but I'm going to make the size at about 35 pixels, so it's a little bit more dominant. And everything else I will just leave as is. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And now I have our first kind of wintry hill started to go. Okay, now that we have created our backdrop for our wintry scene, we're going to go ahead and start adding some of the other elements. And the first thing we're going to do is add some trees. Now there's a couple different ways that we can do this, but probably the easiest way is just to use the custom shape tool. So let me go walk you through how to do that. Now the first thing is we want to go ahead and make sure that we're on our big hill layer. Okay, that's the layer that we're working with. And I'm just going to come over here to where I have my rectangle tool, and I'm just going to right click on that, and a little pop-up menu will come, and down at the bottom you will see the custom shape tool. It's a star. I'm just going to go ahead and click on that. Now if I come up into my tool options bar, you see all kinds of different options, but the two that I'm worried about, first of all, is the shape option right here. It's probably defaulted to an arrow, but if I hit my little drop down menu, you see I get all kinds of custom shapes: light bulbs, stars, check marks, scissors, lightning bolts, whatever I would like to use. But just like brushes, I can load new shapes. So I'll just go ahead and click on my little right pointing arrow here, and I'll come down to where it says Load Shapes. And now Adobe Photoshop comes with a bunch of shapes preloaded, and you can also download shapes off of the internet just like you do with brushes. In this case, I want to choose nature, and I'll go ahead and say load. And then in my palette up here, if I come down to the bottom, you see I have all these nature shapes that have been loaded. I have a moon, I have snowflakes, I have a butterfly, but I also have this tree, and that's what I'm going to go ahead and use to create my tree. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Now the only other thing I need to make sure of is up here in my tool options bar, my style. I'm going to go ahead and once again set that to default. We'll go ahead and put our own styles on our trees once we draw them in. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and leave those blank. So what I can do is I can just come out here into Photoshop, into my canvas anywhere, and I can draw trees, you know, as easily as I want to. Now this is going to be the color of my tree right here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change the color, and I'm actually going to put in the color code 003274. It's kind of a bluish color. I'll go ahead and say OK. And now I'm just going to draw a tree. And what I want to do is I'm just going to have my tree be a little bit taller than this hill. So I'll start right about here, and I'll just kind of draw my tree. And I'll come over into my layers palette, and you see I have shape 1. I'm going to rename that tree 1. Okay, so tree number 1. Then I can just grab my move tool, and I can move this tree around wherever I want it to be. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a second tree, so I'll just grab my custom shape tool, and I'll just draw a tree over in this direction. Okay, and I'll move it kind of exactly where I want it to be. Now I can also add some different colors, and you know, really you would kind of play around with the colors you want. But another good color code is 0078C1. Okay, and I can go ahead and say okay. Now you see it made the tree that color. And I can just draw a whole bunch of trees, and I can make them various sizes and place them around my landscape here. So let me just go ahead and, there's a big one, there's a little one. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and change this one to a different color. And let's go ahead and make this color 108 FDC. And these are just color codes that you've learned throughout time. Just different shades of blue. Now, the other thing I can do, and you notice I have all of these trees over here. I want to rename them Tree 2, Tree 3, Tree 4, Tree 5. Okay, I want to go ahead and rename these because I'm going to put them all in a group later on. Other thing I can do is, okay, let's say I really like Tree 1, which is right here. I can just come over here and I can just drag it down to my new layer palette. Oops, didn't get it there. Drag it down to my new layer palette. And now you see I have Tree 1 copy. I can just rename that Tree, in this case it would be 6. And now I can just move it out somewhere else into the scene where I want it. Once I get one out there, if I want to resize it, let's say I want to resize this one, I can just go up to Edit and Transform and Scale. And now I can resize it and make it as large or as small as I would like. So what you're going to do is you will go ahead and draw out some trees. You need probably 5, 6, 7, 8. You know, you can really do as many as you would like. However many trees you want to put out there. So once we do that, we're ready to go ahead and add our second hill. And it's really easy. I'm just going to go ahead and grab my pen tool once again. And once I grab my pen tool, first of all, got to make another layer. Okay, I have to make another layer. And I'm going to name this layer Second Hill. And I want it on top of the trees. Okay, Second Hill. Now up in the tool options bar, I can go ahead and I can change my color. In this case, I'm going to change it to A7FEF6. Kind of a lighter blue color. Now make sure that you have your pen tool and not your add an anchor or point tool. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to come out here and I'm going to draw a second hill. Alright, and you notice I kind of made it a little bit too tall maybe, so I can just kind of move it down here. Okay, kind of just move it down a little bit. Now I can go ahead and grab my add an anchor point tool, and I can go ahead and add some anchor points, and I'm just going to kind of create a little set of rolling hills again. This time I'm going to add a bunch of anchor points. I'm going to add like 3 or 4, and I'll just lift it a little bit here, lower it a little bit there, and I'm going to move this one down over to here, add another one, lower it down. Okay, and let me just actually scoot this out more over there, and I'm just going to kind of create a rolling set of hills. And actually what you can notice is that it kind of makes these trees right in through here look like they are in between the hills. These ones are up on these hills, these ones are in between the hills. So once I've done that, I can go ahead and add some layer styles to my second hill just like I did before. And it's real easy. I can just come down to my add a layer style menu, and in this case I'm going to go ahead and check inner glow, and now I have some settings to go ahead and mess with. I'm going to go ahead and leave this on screen as always. I'm going to once again change this to a white color right here. Go ahead and change that to white. And I'm going to leave a lot of these the same. I'm going to increase the size of my inner glow from 5 to 43. And you notice you're starting to get this little white edge right here that kind of looks like snow. Let me go back into my layer style. And that's it. Everything else I can leave. I can, mess with this edge and make it a little bit more wintry looking by, increasing the size, or white snow looking, I guess I should say. Whatever you want to do, you can mess with it. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And so now I have a second hill and some trees. Okay, so now that we have our second hill created, we are ready to go ahead and use the pen tool to create our third hill. Now, as always, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put it on a new layer. So I'll just come over to my layers palette, and I want to make sure when I create my new layer that it goes all the way to the top. I want it on top of everything else, and I'm just going to name this layer Snow, because this is going to kind of be our snow here right in front. We have a couple hills, and we're going to add a third hill where there's some snow. Once we added the snow layer, excuse me, the big thing is we want to make sure the color is white. We're going to have our pen tool. We want to make sure the color is white this time. So with my color white, and we don't want any style, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and come down here and create my little snow hill, and it's just like everything else. I'm just going to do the 4 clicks and kind of complete my layer. And then once I do that, I'll go ahead and grab my anchor point tool, and I can just add, I'm going to add a whole bunch of anchor points here and just kind of create a little bit of a little bit of a rolling set of hills. Okay, so you can kind of just get it however you want to get it, and just play around with it and move everything to where you want it. And then once you get it, you just go ahead and hit enter, and you've kind of created a little snow area. And now we're going to add some layer style to that, so it's not just a plain white. First thing I'll do is, with my snow layer highlighted, I'll just come down to my add a layer style icon, and I'm going to add a gradient overlay. And once again, it defaults to this kind of gray and black gradient, but I'm just going to go ahead and double click on that. And over here I'm going to choose a light blue. A good color code is 51DDFE. That kind of gives you a light blue, but you can go ahead and you can choose any color you want. I'm going to actually go out a little bit lighter. Once I get kind of a beginning, I'm just going to choose from my color picker here and go ahead and say OK. And then I'm going to leave this color over here on the right is white. Now, if I kind of move everything around, you can kind of see what it's doing here to my snow, and I feel like there's a little too much blue in it. I want a little bit more white. So I have this little diamond-like slider right here in the beginning. This is the color midpoint. I'm just going to kind of click and hold on that, and I'm just going to drag this down to the left a little bit here so my white becomes a little bit more dominant. You see, if I go all the way to the right, you see how the blue's more dominant. I'm going to take this down to the left and make my white a little bit more dominant, a little less blue, and go ahead and say OK. Now I can go ahead, I kind of have like a snowy look right there. I can mess around with my scale if I want, just kind of mess around with settings to get different appearances. Same thing with the angle. If I wanted to, I can mess with the angle, but I'm actually going to leave my angle at 90. But like I said, you can mess around with that and get whatever you want. Now, once I've gone ahead and added the gradient overlay, I'm going to add some inner glow again. So let me go ahead and click on inner glow, and I'll double click on inner glow to create my settings. And basically I'm going to leave everything the same. I'm going to just change my glow color from yellow to white, and I'm just going to come down and increase the size a little bit out into the 40 somewhere, and that's about it. And then I'll just go ahead and say OK. And so now I got like a little snowy looking layer right here. Okay, so now that we've created our snow layer, we will we'll go next and work on our snowman. Okay, so now we are going to use Photoshop to draw our snowman. But before we start drawing our snowman, if you look over here at the layers palette, you see we're starting to get a lot of different layers, and we're going to have a lot of layers by the time this project is finished. So what we're going to do is we're going to start grouping some of our layers just to make it a little bit more organized over here in the layers palette. So to group it, I'm just going to come down to the bottom of my layers palette. I'm going to click on the create a new group icon, which is just like the folder, It's defaulted to be named Group 1, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to change this to background. And then once I've changed it background, I am going to move my layers into it. Now to move them all at once, I'm just going to go ahead and click on the top layer, which is the snow, and I'm going to hold the Shift key, and as I'm holding the Shift key, I'm going to come down and click on this background layer, so I can go ahead and highlight all of my layers at once, and then I just drag and drop them into my background folder. Now you see they're still here, they've kind of shifted to the right, but if I close my little arrow here, they are now missing. This is just my original white background that we started off with the project, but all of my hills and trees and kind of the blue sky here are now in this background folder. I'm also going to go ahead and create a second folder, and I'm going to name this folder Snowman, because that's where we are going to save all of our layers for our snowman. So now let's go ahead and take a few seconds to create our snowman, and it's pretty simple to do. I'm just going to come over here to the custom shape tool, and I'm going to switch that to the ellipse tool. And now before I begin drawing, I just want to make sure of a couple things. Number one, I don't want any layer style applied. But secondly, I'm going to change my color to white, my base color to white, because as we all know, snowmen are white. Excuse me. Now, I want to make sure that on the layers palette, I am working in my snowman folder, because when I use my ellipse tool to draw a shape, it's going to automatically create a layer for me. So you can just come out anywhere onto your picture and just grab your ellipse tool and draw the base of your snowman. And you see over here, it's going to be named as Shape 1, and I'm just going to go ahead and rename that Base. Now, if I'm not happy with the size of my base of my snowman, I can just come up to the Edit and Transform Path and Scale menu, and you see it puts the little handles around it. Now, as long as I hold down the Shift key, it allows me to keep the proportions as I resize. You notice as I go up, okay, it makes it just as wide, so I can keep the same proportions as I resize it, and I can go ahead and resize it to the size I want and just hit Enter. Now I'm going to add some layer styles, just like we've done on everything else. I'm going to add some layer styles to my snowman. And the first thing I'm going to do is add a gradient overlay. So I'll just come down here to my layer style menu, and I'm going to go ahead and add a gradient overlay. And let me move this just down here towards the bottom a little bit so you can see the snowman. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change my colors first. And you can use whatever colors you want, but I'm going to start off with the color code 27 BCFE, and that kind of gets me into the light blues, and I'm actually then just going to go over a little bit lighter and say OK. And then about 2/3 of the way across, I'm going to add another color marker, and I'm just going to name this FFFFFF, which is pure white, and then I'll leave pure white down here at the end as well. So now you see I have a blue and white snowman. Now you'll notice that on this, it's kind of like a bunch of vertical lines. I don't exactly want that, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mess with my angle. And you can mess with your angle, you know, a whole bunch of ways, but what I want is I want the blue kind of up in this upper right-hand corner. So I'm going to make mine about -143. And then the scale will kind of determine where the blue comes. You see, as I make it a lower scale, you get more blue. So I'm going to make mine a lot larger, kind of out about 140. And just kind of fade that blue out there a little bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and say OK. Now, after I've added my my gradient overlay, I'm going to go ahead and add some inner glow. And I'll just go down to my layer style menu and to inner glow. And the big thing I want, the two big things I want to do is, number one, I want to change my inner glow color to white. And then the second big thing that I want to mess with is the size of my inner glow, and that's going to affect this area right in here. You see right now it's at 5. As I make it bigger, you see like the blue can almost completely go away if I get too big. So I'm just going to mess with mine. I'm going to put mine at about 51. Your setting will really depend on how much blue you want and how large the base of your snowman is. Once I have that, I'm just going to go ahead and say OK. And now I'm ready for the middle part of my snowman. And really, at this point, it's really easy. All I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to grab my base layer, and I'm just going to click and hold down and drag it down to my create a new layer icon. And once I do that, you'll see I have a second layer here. I will rename that middle, and now I can just grab my move tool and I can just drag the second part of my snowman up a little bit. Now we all know as you build a snowman, as it goes up, the parts get a little bit smaller, so I'll go to Edit and Transform Path and Scale. I'll hold down the Shift key to keep my proportion, and I'll just kind of resize the middle part of my snowman to where I want it and hit Enter. Then I can use my Move tool to move it around a little bit, and I have the second part of my snowman. Once I have the second part of my snowman, and actually let me go ahead and make that a little bit smaller because I'm not exactly happy with how I have it. And that's the big thing when you get into this stuff, is you want to really take your time and mess around with it and get it exactly how you want it. The more time you put into it, the more precise everything is, the better it'll look. Once I create that, I'm just going to go ahead and drag my middle layer down to my create a new layer icon, and I'll name this head. And then I have my move tool. I can just pull the move tool out, and once again I'll go up to Edit, Transform Path and Scale, and just resize it. And so now I'm just making it a little bit smaller, and now I have the top of my snowman. So there we go, I've created a snowman. And you know, I can eventually create arms and scarves and all kinds of things, but to start off with, I am going to go ahead and mess with the button. And basically all I'm going to do to draw the button is I'm just going to grab my ellipse tool, and I'm going to come right out here, and I'm going to start down here in the bottom, and I'm just going to draw out a small ellipse for a button. Now once you draw this button out here, you notice that it has that same style that we've applied to other snowman. I'm going to go ahead and go to no style, so it's just pure white. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a gradient overlay to this. Now you can make your gradient overlay kind of any color that you want. You can mess with your color bar to, you know, you can, I don't care what color you do. I'm going to kind of make mine like an orangish reddish color, I believe. So I'm going to go to C6 3224 to start off with. You see it's kind of a red color, and you can choose, you know, whatever variation of red you want from there. And I'll just go ahead and say OK. And then on the other end, I'm going to go EE6C48. And you see that's more of like a little orangish color, and I'm just going to go a little bit lighter there and say OK. And so now I have this little bit of a gradient in my color. You can also mess with the angles and all those types of things if you want. I'm going to put my angle at about 166 just to kind of get a little left to right angle going. And you can mess with the scale and all those different things to just determine exactly what you want your button to look like. But once you have it, you can just go ahead and say OK. And we'll rename that over here button, because remember it always defaults to shape 1. And then once I have my first button, and actually let me just make that button a little bit larger. I just want it to be a teeny tiny bit larger since it's down at the bottom. Once I have that one, I can just drag it onto my create a new layer icon. And you can put as many buttons as you want on your snowman. I'm going to go ahead and move this button up to the second level. And over here I will rename it button 2. And now it's kind of hard to scale something this small, so I'm just going to grab my zoom tool a little bit to move in just to make it a little bit easier. And now I'll go up to Edit, Transform Path, and Scale. And now I have a little bit more room to work. I'll go ahead, remember if I hold down the Shift key, it will keep it the same size for me, keep it proportional. And I'll go ahead and move my button exactly where I want it. And then I'll drag down my next button, and I'll name this button 3. And I'll pull it out, and I'll rescale that. To where I want it, hit enter, and move it around. And now once you get all of your buttons on, you are done, and next we will talk about how to add the smile. Okay, now that we have done the snowman's buttons, we are going to go ahead and work on his face and give him a nose, a smile, and a pair of eyes. And basically I'm just going to use the ellipse tool and the paintbrush tool to create this. Now you'll notice I have the ellipse tool and I just had drawn button number 3, and you see we still have that button style up there. And I'm going to want a different style for his nose, but if I went ahead and went to no style, you see it takes away my style from our button. So let me just go ahead up here and step backwards. The way to get around that is I have to get off of my button number 3 layer. I'm just going to go ahead and click on my Snowman folder, and now I can come up to my style and go to no style. And my color is black, which is fine. We'll mess with that later on. Now I can go ahead and grab my ellipse tool, come out into the middle of my snowman, and just draw his nose in whatever shape you want to draw it. And we'll just draw it out there, and you notice we have a black nose. And you see it put shape 1 over here, and I'll just go ahead and rename that nose. And now I'll just grab my move tool, and I can move my nose to wherever I want my nose to be. Now, you could do whatever color you want on your snowman's nose, but I don't want to leave it black. I want to make it more of like a skin tone. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come down here to my layer style menu and go ahead and go to gradient overlay, and up comes my gradient bar. And I'm just going to go ahead and change the colors like we've done several other times. And you can choose whatever colors you want, but some good color codes to kind of get you in that earth tone area. F8, BD77, and you see that's kind of like a lighter orangish, almost peachish kind of color. I'll go ahead and say OK. And then I'll come over to the other side, and I'm going to change that to 9B4126. And you'll see that's a little bit of a darker kind of brownish color. And like I said, you can change those and get those to whatever you want. But I'll go ahead and say OK. And now you see I have a little more of like a skin tone color to his nose. And just like anything else, you can mess with the angle, you can mess with the scale, get it exactly how you want it. I don't add any shadows to this or strokes, but you can if you want. I mean, it's your snowman, you can do whatever. But once I get it to an area that I like it, I will just go ahead and say OK. And now we have a nose. Now, for his smile and his eyes, I'm actually just going to use the paintbrush tool. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab my paintbrush tool. And you notice if I come out here and try to paint, I get the symbol that I can't paint. Okay. So what I need to do is I need to come over to my layers palette, and I just need to add a layer. And I'm just going to go ahead and name this first layer Smile. And now I'm ready to paint on his smile. And you can use whatever color you want. I'm just going to stick with black. And I'm going to come up here to the tool options bar where my paintbrush tool is. And I'm just going to reset my brushes. That way I know I have my nice basic brushes that I started off with. And one of the nice basic brushes is a circle, which is what I'm going to use for the eyes and for the smile. Now you notice I can change my brush diameter right here, and you also notice I have this hardness setting, and you might be wondering what this hardness setting is. I'm going to go ahead and just illustrate this for you. You don't have to do this, you can just watch. I just want to show you what it is. I'm going to choose a nice big brush, 65 here, and I'm going to come down onto my screen and I'm going to paint. This is with 100% hardness. You notice there is no edge right here. It just goes from black to snow right away. There's a very firm edge, actually, I guess is what I should say. Now let me go up into my brush tool, and that was with 100% hardness. Let me lower my hardness down to I'll just go 30% and come over here and paint. You notice you kind of get this soft edge where it starts to get transparent at the edges. That's what your hardness setting does. It changes kind of the edges of your brush area. So if you ever wondered what that is, that's what that is. Let me go ahead and step backwards and get rid of those things. I was just showing that to you for illustration. Now I'm going to start off with a smile, and I'm just going to come down and I'm going to start with 9. I think 9 and 100% hardness is what I'm going to start with. And I'm just going to come down right below his nose, and I'll go ahead and click my first little part of his smile, and then I'm just going to go a little bit to the right and add another spot, and a little bit to the left, and you can space this out and do whatever you want to do. And There it is to the left. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my zoom tool here and zoom in just so I can be a little bit more precise. Now, once I've added a couple with 9, I'm just going to grab my brush tool and I'm just going to change to the next size brush. Now you see there's not a 7, so I can just go ahead and type in 7 right here, and I'll just come out onto my snowman and I'll just add a 7. And then I'll just go ahead and go into my brush tool, and they have a 5. I'll go ahead and add a 5. And you know, really this is just kind of playing with whatever you want to play with as far as your smile. And there we go. So if I wanted to go to 3s and 2s and 1s, I could go ahead and do that. And let me zoom back out here. And there's my kind of snowman smile. Not the greatest smile, I don't think, but you kind of get the concept. Now I'm going to do the eyes. I'll just grab the brush tool, and what I'm going to actually do is create a new layer, and I'm going to name it eyes. And I just like putting everything on multiple layers, so it's really easy to edit or delete a specific thing if I don't like it later on. And I'm just going to give him some nice big eyes here, and I will go to, let's say, you know, we have 13 and 19. I actually want it to be about 16, so I'll just go ahead and type in 16. And now I can come out, and there's my first eye, and I'll just come a little bit over to the left and create a second eye. And so now I've just used the ellipse tool and the brush tool to create a smile and a set of eyes. Okay, now that we've recorded we've created our snowman, we basically just need to go ahead and create some snowflakes and some text, and we will have our snow day picture. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and come over here and close my snowman folder. And we're going to create another folder, and we are going to name this folder Snowflakes. And I'm going to put all of my snowflakes in there. Now there's several different ways you can actually create snowflakes. You could go out on the internet and you could Google for brushes, winter type brushes, and you can get different things like that. But for me, the easiest way is just using the custom shape tool and then coming up to the custom shapes, and I'm just going to go ahead and load the nature shapes. And I'll go ahead and load those, and you see in the nature shapes right here I have 3 separate snowflakes. And so now it's just a matter of clicking on one and coming out here and just starting to draw out some snowflakes. Now you notice I went ahead and I drew one snowflake, and it's shape 1, and it has this layer style applied to it. So let me go ahead and delete that. I want to make sure, and I've got to delete my entire shape here. I want to make sure that I have no style applied to my snowflake, just as always, and I want my snowflakes to be white, so I'm going to go ahead and choose white. And now I can just go ahead and start drawing out snowflakes. And you see as I draw each snowflake, it puts them out here as shape 1, shape 2, shape 3, and so forth. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw some different snowflakes. And what I actually like to do, I'm going to draw about 10 with this snow brush, or the snow shape, excuse me. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to grab one of my other types of snowflakes, and I'm going to draw some more. And you really can do it however you want to do it. And I'm just going to make them different sizes, some large, some small, and so forth. And then let me grab my final type of snowflake, and I'll just draw some more, just to give me some snowflakes out here in the sky. Now, what I'm going to do, I have 26 snowflakes out here. What I'm actually going to do, they're all at 100% opacity, so I'm just going to go ahead and start lowering the opaqueness on certain ones, and I'm just going to randomly kind of slide them. Some I'm just going to barely change. Some I'm going to put all the way down at like 5%, you know. Going to really move them down, and I'm just going to kind of go ahead and just go through all of these and just kind of mess with this. And you notice what it does, if you look up at the screen, is it makes some snowflakes look like they are close, and it makes other snowflakes look like they are a bit further away. And so that's kind of like what the goal we're trying to create here is, just create a different level of opaqueness with our snowflakes to create maybe some depth and some, you know, make some snowflakes appear close and some far away. And just Just got a few more to do, and like I said, I'm just doing these randomly. Now I'll have to come back and adjust some of these maybe later on when I put my text up there. Maybe have to move some snowflakes around and stuff like that, but just kind of playing with it for now. Okay, so there we go. I've created some snowflakes out there. Now I'm going to go ahead and close my snowflakes folder. And now I just need to add some text. We're going to have to add two different areas of text. One to say that the school is closed, and one that people can click on to get into our website. So I'm just going to come down here and add a new layer, and I'll just grab my text tool. And now I'm going to use the Snowdrift font. And you can use, whatever color you would like to use or anything like that. I'm just going to stick with white, and I'm going to go ahead. My first message is going to say the Tuscarawas Valley Local Schools, and then I'm going to hit the enter key, and that'll put me on a separate line. Are closed today due to severe weather. And then I'm just going to kind of go ahead and grab my move tool, and I'll move these right out into the middle. And actually what I need to do is resize these, make these a little bit larger. And now you notice, because I used white font and I have some white snow, it's starting to blend in with the snow. I can just use my layer styles. I can add a drop shadow to mess with that a little bit, help out with that. I can add stroke. Okay, I can do different things to go ahead and make that stand out just a little bit from the background. Let me go ahead and use some stroke, and that's really up to you, whatever you want your settings to be. So I'll go ahead and say OK. Now, you see this snowflake right here is still really kind of showing up. I could just go ahead and click on this, and if I look on my shapes, I kind of see little dots where these snowflakes are located. You see this is that one right there. And it takes a little bit of playing around until you find it. But I'm going to go searching for that specific snowflake because I need to lighten it up. And eventually I will find it. And sometimes it takes a while here. It's just a matter of going through and clicking on them. Of course, the one I pick is going to be the one that's going to take the longest to find. Okay, now that I've found it, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to lower its opaqueness level down a little bit more because I think it's, kind of blending in with my text a little too much. I'm just going to go ahead and lower that out a little bit. Now, the next thing I need to do is I just need to add some text down here at the bottom. And so what I'll do is I'll close my snowflakes. I'm going to add another new layer. And this is going to say, let me go ahead and resize this down a little bit. This is going to say, click here to enter the Tuscarawas Valley Local Schools website. And you see I typed it in white, but I'm going to go ahead and make this like a blue color. And you know what? Actually, I want it to be this exact blue color right out here. So what I could do is I could just go into my background folder, and I'll go out to my background layer, and I'll just grab my eyedropper tool right here, and I'll just come out and click on this. And now you notice it gives me my blue color that I just clicked on. And I can double click and I can see that's color code 005D9C. And actually what I'll do is I'll copy that. And now I'll come to my font layer and I'll double click the, whoops, wrong one. I'll double click to highlight my font. I'll come up here to my color selector and I will just paste in that code and say OK. And now I look at what I typed. I see a few errors there. I need to fix and I feel like it's a little bit too small, so I'll go ahead and make it a little bit larger. Maybe 26 font maybe is what I want. And there we go. I've created a snow day message for the website.